Hello, this is the demonstration and kind of performance instructions on how to download, just everything about the patch, the Dragon. So this is a piece and patch of Super Collider for Solo Electronics, and I'll walk you through the entire download, getting everything set up, and then I'll show you all the parameters, what they do, and then walk you through the piece, and give you some tips on if things aren't working correctly. I was gonna have this go straight into the video, the audio be recorded, straight out of Super Collider, but it was giving me a lot of issues, so I decided I'd just do it like this. And it also kind of fits with the piece because when I coded this, it was finals week of my freshman year, and so I was listening to it out of my computer speakers, which is not the best way to do things, but it is the way that I was doing things during that last week of school, just on couches in the lobby of the dorm. So, kind of fits with the piece. So, to download, first thing you're going to do is you're going to go to brazerecords.com. It'll look like this. This is our new website. It'll probably be updated, but you'll go to portfolio or maybe about, and you'll just find my GitHub, or you could scroll down and see the exact, like this is the patch, a picture of the patch, like on my portfolio. So it has all the instructions, and you also see what the fonts look like. If you don't download the fonts, then they'll just be like static text, I guess just normal text. So if you want the extra little fun, you can download the fonts. They're in the GitHub, but you don't have to. So this is what the patch would look like. So then you go to my GitHub, or you could just find Braze Heights JD on GitHub. You'll download this. This is the main thing. You want the Super Collider folder, Super Collider document, I guess. And then you have all the fonts, a README, and then this is a UGen that you have to download for the filter. But you shouldn't do it like this. I'll update the GitHub later, but you're going to want to go to SC3 plugins, maybe type in GitHub after. You'll go like that. SC3 plugins Super Collider. You'll go here. You'll scroll down to installation, GitHub release page, and then depending on what kind of computer you have, I would download the Mac OS. I've already downloaded it. It's right here in my downloads. So once you've downloaded it, you'll be in Super Collider. You go File, Open User Support Directory, and then go to Extensions and drop it in there. Then after that, you're going to need to recompile the class library, and then then it's basically recognizing, okay, now we have this new UGen in there, collection of UGens. SC3 has a lot of UGens, so that might be helpful for you later on if you're just getting started with Super Collider. So then the next thing you want to do is I would recommend opening the Super Collider document in Super Collider, saving it, and then closing it, because I've had a bunch of issues. I'm not going to do it right now because it's already working, it's green, but I've had some issues with that in the past, like if you load it in and then you try and do other things before you initially boot. So I would say the best thing to do is open Super Collider and immediately do Command B, Command B, and then it'll boot up. This will turn yellow first initially, and then it will turn green, and then you can reboot to add all of your different things. So in terms of audio devices, outputs, you're going to want to increase the memory size. And you're going to want to call this as well. This is the server default equals s equals server dot internal. And then you can just reboot. And if you have issues where you've opened Super Collider twice, you can do kill all. And then you can just reboot and just keep messing around with things until it works. If things aren't working still, you could try and reboot the interpreter. Restart your computer if really need be. So once you boot it the first time, it will give you a list of your audio devices. You'll want to set your output and your input. Basically, just sometimes you could have the error of the sample rate not fitting. So you'll just want to, if you're using the same input and audio and output device, like I usually do with Blackwell 2 channel, then you're good. And MacBook speakers and MacBook Air speakers and MacBook Air microphone will both work together because there's no audio input here, so it doesn't really matter. So you could put anything in your audio input so that it matches the sample rate of your output, and Super Collider will take that. So you do that. You call, I would say, your input, your output, and then your the memory size. We're just making the memory size a little bit bigger so it doesn't crash as easily. And to run those, if you don't know Super Collider, you do Command Return or Command Enter, and then you could select, I could just go here and go Command Return, right, and it would work. That's basically everything you need to get set up. I do explain that in the patch, but if you can't open the patch, you can't see the instructions. So now let's open the patch. So this is what it looks like with the normal text. So you have start buttons. It's so sad to me that there's no fonts here, but okay, so let's go through it. So Right now it's going out of my MacBook speakers, so I can turn up the amplitude. So one thing that's incredibly important to know about this patch is that when you open it up, there's all these knobs, right? The knobs are all, they all correspond to some parameter in the sound. And they are all at 100%, but the parameters are not at 100%. So you're going to have to move the knob first for the computer to start listening, the parameter to start like listening to what the knob's position is, right? So like this is, like for example, this is up here, and let's say I mess around with the pitch, right? So now you hear all this pitch movement, but the pitch mix slider is all the way down. So that's because it's actually probably somewhere over here. It's fully pitched, and now there's no pitch, right? There's no pitch shifting. So just, that's something to keep in mind. Okay, so let's keep the pitch shift down. This is a secondary volume right here for the Dragon. This is our main, these are your two main sound sources, but with this one, it's gonna be doing the bulk of the initial sound. So you have amplitude here, and then you also have a volume over here. No real distinguishing factor, I guess. There's nothing really separating these. It's just that now one's over here. So that way, if you're over here or over here, you can more easily get to that volume. Okay, over here, let's talk about the beginning of the Dragon. So you have these 6 controls. You have amplitude, duration. The duration is the how long these pulses are, which you're hearing as the sound, I guess. And if you make the duration shorter, there will be more pulses because it's going to have the same amount in the same amount of time, right? Then coefficient, for our purposes, I'll try and make this loud enough you can hear it, is like our pitch, right? If you make it really low, it'll be very low, right? And then attack, sustain, and release, they are not at 100%, because if they were at 100%, it'd be more like that, right? So you can get these very nice, noisy textures with this. And then, of course, you have the pitch shift. This is from the Pitch Shift UGen, if any of you are Super Collider users. But like I can turn this up. This is your pitch shift factor, essentially the ratio. So you could turn it up for higher, and then this is like your kind of your randomness, and then you can mess around with the window size that it's scanning for changing the pitch, and this time dispersion. So let's pull that back down. Let's make this maybe a little bit more manageable. I'm not going to do much more with the Dragon, but there is a reverb here built in, but there's also a verb over here, which I'll talk about when we go through the piece. So you also have this Dust Edition. It's the best UGen. I love it so much. I've been learning Max recently, and I feel like nothing compares to like Dust. So anyway, you can add a little bit of Dust. You can get it noisier if you want to. That is the Dragon. Over here is the Treasure. This is a separate sound source. So let's see. Gotta press start. Let's turn that down a little bit. So here, the duration functions pretty much the same, pretty much in the same way, and then the meow is, I say it over here, but it is a multiplier of the frequencies generated. So you can make it really low, it'll be very low. And I say here, move K-view if needed. You'll need to move this. This is just a Lissajous curve, so you can see your X versus your Y of the stereo signal that you're sending out. Okay, so here you have a couple of physical modeling things that you can mess with if you'd like, and then you have attack, sustain, release of this sound. So let's turn meow back up. And this one you kind of got to be careful with in terms of volume, because it can, I mean, as you saw there, right? So that's the Treasure. You'll hear more about it whenever I go through the piece. Over here we have the Cave. This is basically like the effects unit. So you have this reverb, which has been on the whole time. And in the beginning, I tell you to turn everything down except the volume. So this is just a little bit of granular processing at the end of the chain, but the granular sounds go into the reverb. So you can have the reverb up and no granular delay, grain delay, I guess. But if the reverb is down, you won't hear the grain delay because it's going into the reverb, right? But that's because you don't really need the granular sounds without the reverb. And then over here, this is the filter, and I'll talk about this more when we're reading through the piece, but it's important to know that this is why you need the SC3 plugins. So that way I wouldn't have to have you choose the three different filter modes. But it does have a click. So I say in this later, but if you want that clicky, noisy sound, like let's say you have your dust all the way up and you're going for a harsh sound, I'll just turn this down while I keep talking. You'll hear that click. So if you want to avoid that click, you'll turn the mix down, move the mode to whatever kind of filter you want, and then turn the mix back up to refilter it. But I mean, of course, if you don't, I mean, maybe if you have some kind of like mixer and you can turn it down and then move it really quick, or if you like that click, if you want that click, then feel free. If you're going for that sound, go for it. Okay, so now let's kind of go through the piece. So I say here, check if you've chosen the correct hardware output, increase memory size, called sRuby if needed. It's the instrument and the store. This is part of the project 7/8 for Solo Electronics, and one of the, and then there's a list of other things that it is also that are part of those Solo Electronic pieces, and one of those is notational electronics. So the idea is that the electronics speak for themselves. You don't have to have a score separate. So you find the dragon. So you go into the cave, and I basically say turn down everything except the volume. I tried to keep it so that the volumes have different names. Like if you're talking about the cave, you know that you're with the cave's vol instead of here. Just hopefully that made it easier, but I don't know how well I effectively did that. So yeah, turn everything down except for vol, and then you're just going to sit in the textures and mess around with the amplitude and duration knobs. Remember that if you've turned this volume down, you have to turn it back up. So let's put that back up a little bit. And I would keep this maybe lower and maybe move more with this one. So now you just mess with the duration and amplitude. Then once you're ready, you're going to bring in the attack, sustain, and release. So maybe pull these down, make it very short and choppy. And then you can make the duration a bit slower. So one thing to also keep in mind is that if you bring your duration of the dragon or the treasure down all the way, it will crash the patch, which we will utilize later. But for now, you don't want to do that accidentally. Okay, I just totally did that accidentally. Wow. Okay, so that's crazy. Okay, so in the case that that happens, or for the end of the piece when we do that, you can just command stop and then start it again. So now we're back at it again. Everything is now back up the way that it would start. That was insane. I said don't do it, and then I did it. Yeah, don't bring duration down to 0%. Use the secondary drag volume slider if you need additional volume control. Don't get too loud yet. Once ready, improvise with the pitch shift. We already kind of talked about that. And then mix slider, try out the dragon's personal reverb, and then add dust if you want. So you'll mess around with that until you feel comfortable with it, and then you'll enter the cave. So once you've sufficiently experienced the controls of the dragons, you use the cave and you add some effects. And then I basically say the same thing with this click. You know, you can hear it, but you can turn the mix down, move it, and then bring this back up, right? And then the idea is that you bring up the verb. I say, so if there's no reverb, you won't hear the grains. So you got to turn up the verb first, then mess with the grains. And then you can mess around with that. And then as you're messing around with that, just you're just improvising, but you can mess with these controls as well. So then you go to the treasure. Here you have to move the cave view. I say literally move the cave view. So you're going to slowly bring down the amplitude of the dragon. And then you're going to turn the volume of the treasure down to 0 and then start. You're going to bring our dur, which is right here, down to 12. And then bring attack, sustain, and release to about 730. Let's go ahead and do that. Oh, you got to start it. You have to press start. Okay. Then you're going to turn ball all the way down. I think I tell you these things before you actually start the sound. Yeah, so then you slowly improvise with the meow knob. So the meow knob is a multiplier of frequencies again. And then you'll just explore with this, finding things that you like, however you want to do that. This is what these effects kind of do. They're very feedbacky. Maybe not the best for MacBook speakers. Find some soft chords to sit in, improvise with the cave controls. Now you're going to free improvise with everything. So now you're just messing around with the entire patch, exploring what we need to do. Yeah. One thing that will be, I think I need to add a limiter to this patch still. So it will be updated by the time you see this video. So now, when you're performing this, you won't put it full screen because you don't want the audience to see this part. But I mean, if you're messing around, I mean, go for it. But if you're performing it, you wouldn't show the audience this. You'd read it beforehand, and then you just do it when you perform. But I literally say that here. Continue improvising, but become increasingly erratic with your parameter choices. Generally, turn things further than you normally would, and gradually approach a noise or wall of sound like texture. Keep it in the reds. It's an inside joke, but it's a metaphor. You just get noisier. And then finally, you turn the dur and duration knobs all the way down to 0. this will crash the patch like I accidentally did earlier. Yeah, I say turn, and yeah, so if you turn up the attack, sustain, and release, like it will make these little like let's, for example, one grain, it will, okay, I think I just did it accidentally again, maybe by turning that up. Yep, I did. So let's pretend that I did that on purpose in the context of the piece. But you have to be really careful with that, because if your duration is much lower than the added time of the attack, sustain, and release, then you're going to end up with it's going to be trying to generate things faster than it could handle while it's still processing others, and it will totally crash. So I'm kind of exploiting that. So at the end of the piece, you purposely crash it after intensifying for a bit, and then if it won't crash for some reason, maybe your computer is really good at handling it, or you increase the memory size larger than it was given to you in the patch, then you just increase in intensity until you can't anymore, and then you wait for 10 seconds and then command period to stop will sound. That's something I said that earlier, but you can command period, it'll stop will sound. Yeah, so that's the dragon. Yeah, by the time you see this video, I'll add a limiter to everything, so that it won't, I might have already added a limiter, I'm not sure. I'll check, but then it will be updated on GitHub to have like a link to this video, and a link to the SC3 plugins instead of trying to download just the Black Rain UGens. If you have any questions, you can email me or put them in the comment section. I don't know how many people are going to play this piece, but if you do want to play this piece, this is my instructional video. Yeah, and there'll be an instructional video for every piece of 7-8. Yeah, so cool.